Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Seeds of Hope, Regenerative Agriculture with Elena Garitas. I'm your host, and today I want to welcome you to a 5-episode mini-series of conversations I recorded at the Regenerative Agriculture Summit in Chicago this March. Each episode is 15 to 20 minutes long and packed with science-driven innovations, inspiring entrepreneurial stories, and passionate regenerative agriculture professionals. From worms that can transform plastic into fertilizer to cutting-edge sustainable fisheries, fine wine production, regenerative marketing, and digitizing supply chains, these conversations showcase the creativity and ingenuity that's happening across our ecosystem. So, as always, grab a cup of tea and let's ground into this conversation together.
Okay, sweet. Well, Sam, I already got a little bit of a sneak peek into what you do and got really excited about it. But I'd love for you to just share in your own words, introduce yourself and talk about the work that you do. Certainly. What is it that you do?
So I work with worms, earthworms primarily, and we use them for two major purposes. One is we actually produce a fertilizer from the earthworm manure, which is really, really sustainable. It's very, very regenerative. It's good for soil. It helps farmers save money. And the other side of it is that we use earthworms to actually eat and destroy plastic waste. So,
which is mind-blowing.
It's
and I'm going to ask you more questions about this.
Please do. I love talking about it.
Okay, so you farm the worms, and then you have, right now, the end product of the fertilizer, which is worm tea.
Yes, worm tea. That's what they call it. It's not a beverage. It's entirely a fertilizer, but they call it worm tea. It's a liquid.
Have you tested it?
So, yes. Myself and my best friend, when we first started it, we had a kind of like a bet going about trying it. It's fully non-toxic. It's food safe. It tastes like dirt. But of course, plants love it. I guess they think it must taste amazing. But it's very, very good for growing crops. And it's a worm tea. You take a worm casting from a farmer. In our case, we work with several farmers as well as farm some ourselves. We take those castings, we mix them in kind of like you would make beer, almost like hops, and we let it soak in the water. We get some nutrients out of it. We filter it, and we add our own microbes into it in order to give it an extra boost. And at that point, you have a kind of worm tea, a worm kombucha, a worm brew, which we call Wriggle Brew, which we can then send to a farm, and it's shelf stable. It's very, very good for growing things like soy and corn and other crops. And the result is something the farmer can use instead of, ammonia or some other nitrogen fertilizer, or instead of whatever synthetic he might be using, he can use this.
Are there any other benefits beyond fertilization that worm tea provides?
Yes, there are. So we can't advertise a lot of these, but many studies have found that worm teas actually act as a kind of natural bio-pesticide. So some of them are able to fight off things like mealybugs and spider mites. I've seen a lot of really good results with rusts and mildews and molds. And the reason is probably because worm teas tend to be full of plant defensive compounds. So when worms...
What does that mean?
That's another good question. So a defensive compound is something a plant produces to defend itself. So plants are not helpless. I mean, they may appear that way, but they're chock full of a chemical cocktail that they use to fight off all kinds of insects. So, for example, spicy peppers, they have a compound called capsaicin in them. So I don't know if you've ever had a spicy pepper. I'm sure you have.
I have.
Being Greek, I know peppers are a big thing. Those peppers have capsaicin, and capsaicin is what gives us that burning sensation in our mouth. Capsaicin is one of many thousands of compounds that plants have. And for us, it's a spicy compound, but for insects, it causes their mandibles to fall off. Or in some cases, it gives them indigestion to death.
Oh my goodness. I mean, sometimes I feel like that after having spicy food.
I mean, if you ever have like a Carolina Reaper, it's like, you feel like you want to die.
Right. But
the same thing, caffeine. Caffeine's a polyphenol compound, also defensive compound produced by plants. If you drink nothing but black coffee in the morning with nothing to eat, you can experience the same thing insects do with their indigestion. And so these compounds are what plants use to defend themselves, and earthworms produce a special enzyme called a surfactant enzyme that preserves these compounds. So when they're chewing through leaf litter in the ground and they come across capsaicin, they don't digest it. They consume it, but it ends up intact inside of their manure, which means when you brew a liquid from that manure, the manure ends up chock full of all those defensive compounds. And now you can spray them onto a plant, and the plant is going to have basically double the defenses it normally would.
So it that compound is available for the plant to absorb. It's plant available
Yes.
and reintegrate into the system, even if it comes from another plant?
In essence. So it's sort of like putting sunscreen on yourself. You know, the sunscreen isn't really going to become part of your body, but it will protect the outer layer of you. And the same thing applies to these compounds. So if you spray a plant with capsaicin, the capsaicin isn't going to become part of the plant's biomass, but it will stick around on the outside of the plant's body. And when Mr. Mealybug or whatever it is comes around, he gets a mouthful of it, he's not going to have a good time.
So you also talked about that you can break down plastics, which is pretty wild.
It is very wild.
How does that work?
So, I mean, I can't tell you too much, but
Okay.
what I can tell you is it also relates to how earthworms deal with toxins in the soil. So earthworms deal with things like capsaicin by wrapping an enzyme around it to preserve it. And when they come across other compounds, things like toluene, which is a natural byproduct of pine resin, they have a special microbe that digests that for them. In fact, they have a whole host of microbes that digest all kinds of things for them. But toluene, a compound you find in pine resin, is also very similar to styrene and benzene and lots of other compounds which plastics are made out of. So, in certain cases, when worms are starving, you can actually feed them things like styrofoam, polystyrene plastic, and they will eat it and digest it as a food source. Now, they don't eat very much, but the same microbes that live inside of them can be extracted, and they can be bred to live inside reactors that kind of simulates the conditions of the worm. And in those reactors, the plastic can be fed into them, and it gets digested in the reactor just like it would inside the worm's gut, except much more quickly. And what comes out is essentially worm poop, just minus the worm. And so in 5 days, you can take about a pound of plastic waste and convert it entirely into biodegradable, soupy material. And that we can then feed to earthworms, and they can make worm castings from it.
Okay, so you're taking the worm castings that contain this enzyme,
Yes.
and you're basically creating worm stomach
Yes.
outside of the worm to digest the plastic
Yes.
into a liquid.
Yep. I mean, it's kind of like how a composter works. A composter is full of all these different microbes that are eating different materials. We're basically making a controlled composter that instead of, being full of solid soil material, is full of liquidized plastics and liquid nutrients and the same microbes from the gut of the worm. And yeah, you get poop out of it, which becomes manure.
And are there any microplastics in the end result? What is the end result?
The end result, so I guess it depends on what you count as the end, but when the microbes are done with it, there's no more microplastic. At that point, what you have is an entirely biodegradable gelatinous goop. It's the same compounds you'd find inside a worm's intestine kind of halfway through the digestion process. But it is biodegradable. So that material can just go out to a field. But you can also take it, and like I said, you can feed that to an earthworm to complete the digestive process. And at that point, you're getting worm casting on the other end with no plastic in it at all, which is very, very cool.
That is incredibly cool, especially when I think about recycling today, which is amazing, but there are a lot of challenges around it.
Huge challenges, yeah.
And waste management in general is a challenging industry to be in. How are you thinking about that?
Well, one of
as a
the
business?
things, well, it's a good question because, like you're saying, it's like a very hard industry to get into. You're talking about big scale, transporting garbage is expensive, so it's not like we can just airdrop worms onto a landfill, That's not going to be able to be something practical. But what we could do is we could set up digesters, the part that actually break the plastic down with microbes, at manufacturing facilities where they're dealing with lots of plastic waste. When they bottle soda into, these PET bottles, there's a lot of waste that's produced at the factory. If you could have a reactor there, you could digest it on the spot. There's no logistics to transport the waste. Another way to do this is to start to try and breed the microbes in this reactor to start producing lots of the enzymes they use for eating plastic and harvest those enzymes. And then you could start taking those to fields, you could start taking them to landfills and start digesting the plastic that's there by applying the enzyme rather than the microbe itself.
Is that an aerobic or anaerobic process?
It's an aerobic process.
Okay.
So we're dealing with mostly fairly well-known bacteria. And these guys, they will eat plastic. They just don't tend to like to. But through a process of essentially accelerated selective breeding, we can get them to become more and more accustomed to eating this plastic. And eventually we can get them to produce vast quantities of the enzymes that denature these plastics. And that is a system that would allow us to send these enzymes all over the world. Go to the Pacific garbage patch where there's this giant island of plastic floating out there and have it break down in situ. Don't even necessarily have to pick it up. Or go to the landfills where the plastic is being gathered and break it down there. And that's something that gives me a lot of hope because, if this process can work on a few plastics, then other processes might work on the remainder of plastics. And then, rather than being a problem no one really knows how to solve that's building up, microplastics in our brains, it can be something that we can actually shut the book on, which would be nice.
That's incredible. I mean, it really sounds futuristic almost. It's wild to think that all of this comes from worms.
Comes from worms.
And you mentioned earlier scaling and going directly to companies and manufacturers who are producing a lot of waste at the source.
Yes.
How are you thinking about partnerships, or maybe that's already one step further, but how are you thinking about scaling, and what are the challenges or what are the opportunities you see there?
I like the word opportunities there. There are a lot of challenges too, though. So one of the big ones is we're a relatively small startup. So actually making contacts with the large businesses to make this happen is a big challenge. Communicating to the decision makers is not super easy. It's part of why I'm actually here talking to you at this summit, is so I can get more reach. Another big challenge is putting together the actual equipment to breed microbes. So it's going to require a significant initial investment. You need to have, large, essentially fermenters. It's kind of like building a big brewery. So a lot of equipment has to be made, and there are regulatory concerns as well. Because when you're dealing with plastic waste, you're dealing with, forever chemicals, PFAS, emissions from the plastic if you're, getting it to a liquid state. So those are things you have to be compliant with. And you really don't want to end up creating more problems than you're trying to solve. So there's a lot to be solved, but there's solvable problems that just require, willpower and time.
Yeah. I don't want to get too off track, but
I'll go for it.
just want to ask, does this process break down PFAS?
It can. So PFAS is a component that can be broken down by this process. It's not something that we're sourcing directly to break down, but it's something we've broken down incidentally while doing this.
Okay.
So,
but not always?
Always in the sense that if it's contained in the plastic in the normal levels that you find, then yeah, it can be broken down. The interesting question becomes, what about PFAS that's already kind of like out there and is concentrated in levels that you wouldn't normally anticipate? So you go to a landfill, there's like a lot more PFAS maybe in one part of it than there is in another part. There's a lot more of other kinds like BPAs and things like that than you might expect. So the enzyme mixture that you're making might work really well for the idealized waste that you're receiving, but may not work so well for the waste that's actually out in nature. So you may need to create different enzymatic mixes to deal with those different chemical realities.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's a lot of trial and error, I think, in the end.
Yeah, and that's where also some of the investment is needed, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. Further research.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're looking to partner with those big clients to get those big contracts. Is one of the reasons that you come to this conference. And have you gained any insights or examples here that you might bring back to your company and how you do things, how you think about things?
Yeah, actually, I've learned a lot at this summit. So there was a speaker the other day, I think I mentioned him to you earlier, Rick, and he has...
Clark, yeah.
Yes. He's got a farm where he's doing everything regeneratively. And he talked about how hard it is. And he walked through the economics of how much money he's saving not using nitrogen compounds or phosphorus compounds. It was a very interesting way of looking at problems involved with using synthetic compounds and how they're not just bad for the planet, they are bad for the farmer. They create negative feedback cycles of dependence, of soil destruction, and of debt for these farmers. And so it taught me a lot about how I should perhaps communicate to these farmers and talk to them on a level where I'm, getting at the problems they're really concerned about. I mean, they care about the soil. They care about the soil more than almost anybody, but they also care about survival, and they care about, saving money. So a sustainable solution like what I have has to be something that not only is helping them in terms of ecology, but it's helping their bottom line. It's helping their family survive. So I learned a lot from that talk. It was really cool. Also, he has worms, so that was nice.
Oh, yeah.
Earthworms, yeah.
Okay, very cool. But yes, that's definitely a theme I've heard at this conference. And there were a few producers here. I don't know if you've had the chance to meet with other farmers.
I have a few, yeah.
But we really need more of this cross-industry collaboration where we have the big corporates in the room, but we also have the farmers in the room and we have the innovators in the room.
I agree. Yeah.
Learning from each other. And really this focus on, okay, let's talk about farming as a business.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about corporates as a business. We're talking about startups as a business, investors as a business, and farmers, as you said, they need to survive.
They do.
So
And they're pressed harder than almost anyone. And we talk about a lot of research in the lens of, oh, how interesting is this? How profitable is this for the researcher? But how profitable is it for the farmer? That's a big question.
Yeah. Are there any conversations, maybe along this line or maybe different, that you wish we were having more of?
That's another very interesting question. I wish we were talking a little bit more about the algal blooms. So that's a big issue where I'm from, and you know about this in Florida. We have red tide. Yeah. We have these massive algal bloom events that are killing all the fish stocks. And a lot of that's being driven by fertilizer runoff. It's coming down through rivers, it's coming off beaches, and it's a lot of it driven by various agricultural industries. And I wish we were talking a lot about that, because the farmers that are involved in that, a lot of them, they don't want to hear it because, you know, that's how they make their livelihood. And a lot of the ecological advocates, they just want to ban these fertilizers that they're using outright because they want to solve the problem. But there's no real compromise position between the two. You know, and I wish there was more solution searching happening there. Part of why we exist is to be a solution to help with that. But there's lots of different solutions for lots of different farms. And I wish there was more effort between the two parties to find an amicable solution. Because I don't want to have a situation where there's no more fish left, you know, living around Florida. We have beautiful reefs. We have, you know, springs. We've got lakes with all kinds of things in it. I don't want that to be a dead zone. But I also don't want 1.5 million people to lose their livelihood, especially, you know, generational farmers who've been doing it since the 1800s or something in many cases. So it's a very challenging thing. And right now, a lot of the discussion and discourse is just combative rather than collaborative, as you say.
Right. I think we need to do a lot more listening, active listening, to understand, okay, what is it really at the root that each party wants and each party struggles with, so that we can actually come to solutions that aren't just black and white. Oh, let's straight out ban this, but not provide any support or alternatives. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So is there anything else that you want to share with our audience today?
Well, I think one last thing I would share is, if you're passionate about the environment, if you care about these issues, the most important thing you can do is be involved in them. You know, don't just listen to things, but also become a part of the conversation. You might have a solution for a problem that no one's anticipated. Myself and my friends, we started our business out of college because we were maybe naive enough to think we might be able to solve an issue. And in the end, we did create a new solution. So I think a big thing that should be encouraged beyond just collaborating is also encouraging people to themselves become innovators and to themselves become participants in the solution. That's my message of hope.
Okay, I love that. So basically know that you do have agency to participate and to contribute.
Yes, anyone can do it. I mean, we met several young innovators here at the showcase. There was a young man from England who developed a way to make new cordage from potato stalks. There was a young woman, Alex, with what are they called? Good Agriculture. And they developed a money-saving tool for farmers to analyze their costs and expenditures. Those are young people who they haven't, you know, maybe been jaded enough by their time in industry to be afraid to try these things, to try and pitch these ideas. I think anyone can do stuff like that, and everyone should try.
So as someone who has taken that leap, and when did you find Wriggle Brew? Found?
Yeah.
When did you start Wriggle Brew?
I found it. I founded it.
Yes.
I started it in 2022. And it was originally a senior project for me at UCF, University of Central Florida, and a couple friends. When I graduated in 2023, we got our first grant from the National Science Foundation. Another from the USDA followed after that. And now, 2025, we're actually starting to sell it to major farms and just get distribution across the Midwest. So it's been a wild and really fun journey. And I think there's a lot of good stuff to do ahead of us.
Yeah,
like
plastic. Plastic, exactly. Yeah, first of all, congratulations. I've been a founder before, and I know how difficult and exciting it is. It's a roller coaster sometimes.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people who are inspired by your message and are like, okay, I want to know, how can I brainstorm ideas? How can I get started? How can I test an idea? Anything from your journey that you wish you could tell your 2022 self?
It's a very good question. So it's kind of two questions. The first thing is, as far as advice I would give, I would say have stamina. You got to be aggressive to go after opportunities. You got to have some fighting spirit, but you also have to have the stamina to stick with them, because you're going to get 8 no's before you get a yes for a lot of things. And when you do get that yes, that's not the end of the book. You have to keep getting more yeses. You have to keep getting, recurring sales and recurring trials and data and so forth. If I were to go back in time and tell myself something that I should have done, I think one of the big things would be to do more research on what my customer actually wants. Because a lot of people make this mistake of trying to sell to themselves. They say, oh, I have an idea for something cool. And then they end up marketing it basically to themselves. They list the properties they think are interesting about it, the properties they think are neat, rather than doing the work to actually interview and survey and question those who will actually be your customers. Because you end up finding out that they tend to have very different priorities, interests, and wants than you do. And you need to actually market to who you're selling to.
Yes, I think this is such an important piece that doesn't only happen in the beginning, but as you know,
all the time
iterating.
Yes.
Customer discovery is paramount. And I love to build on that also, and saying that once you do have customer discovery, then you test a prototype. And so you're always testing, you're always asking questions.
Yes.
So really solid advice.
Because you're always learning more. Your customers are changing just as you are. They are people too. Their needs change, their wants change. So you got to keep discovering them. When I started this, I was a chemistry major. So the language that I used to describe our product was obscure, technical, and just not very compelling. I ended up finding out that what people cared about most about our fertilizer was that it was safe, is that it doesn't burn your plants, it doesn't burn your skin. If you get a bottle of some anhydrous nitrogen or whatever, and you get that on your skin, you need to wash it off for 20 minutes. If you swallow it, you have to go to the hospital.
Right.
Ours is safe. If you pour it on yourself, it isn't going to burn anything. If you swallow it, that's gross, but it's not going to kill you.
Right.
And so I didn't realize that was something people really cared about. I was under the impression that they'd care about the technical yield results or the impact that it had on pest prevention. So my thinking in that direction was way off the mark. A lot of my friends who are in the startup space have done that mistake. So yeah, you got to go after your customers and figure out what they really care about. Survey them without bias. Survey them in a way where you can really figure out, okay, that's what you actually care about, and respect them for it. Don't be like, oh, that's silly that they like that, not this other thing that I was pitching to them. You got to have the humility to realize that they're the ones with the actual problem. So their mind is the one that's dealing with those issues, not yours.
Yeah. Well, Sam, as we wrap up, I'd love if you could share, where could someone find out more about Wriggle Brew? How can we support you?
Well, you can go to our website, wrigglebrew.com. That's WRIGGLEBREW.com. You can also search up Wriggle Brew online. We're the first results. We're on Amazon as well if you're interested in trying it for your home or your garden. And if you're a farmer, please feel free to give me an email or drop me a line through our contact form. I'm more than happy to talk about how our product could be something that could save you money and help your farm be more efficient.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You too. That's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Seeds of Hope. Our wonderful theme music is composed by Dane Myers. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you never miss an episode. Share it with a friend who might find it inspiring. And if you're loving the podcast, we'd be grateful if you could leave a rating and review on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. It really helps others discover us. See you next time, and thanks again.